It was supposed to be just another take. The lights were too bright, the floor too polished, and the elevator door had been opening and closing so many times the sound of it had started to feel like part of the soundtrack. But then, something happened, something that no one planned, something that didn't belong to any line of dialogue or camera angle. When the doors slid shut for what was meant to be the final time, the world outside disappeared, and for a fleeting moment, it wasn't Ji-won and Sarang standing there anymore. It was Junho and Yoon-ae, and the air between them shifted like it suddenly remembered what real tension felt like. The crew outside laughed, chatted, called out cues, but inside that tiny mirrored box, silence grew thick. Junho's hand brushed hers accidentally, or maybe not accidentally at all, and that single touch carried a weight that neither of them had prepared for. His eyes met hers, and she didn't look away. She couldn't. Something about the dim golden reflection in those metal walls made it feel like time had folded in on itself, trapping them in a moment that wasn't meant for cameras. "You okay?" he asked softly, his voice a whisper that didn't belong to the character anymore. Yoon-ae nodded, but her lips trembled slightly, betraying what her heart already knew. "Yeah," she said. "Just different." He smiled faintly. "Different's not bad." The elevator halted with a soft jolt, the floor lights flickering as if even the electricity hesitated to interrupt them. The plan was to open the doors and cut to the next scene, but something in Junho's eyes told her they weren't ready to leave yet. The script had ended 3 lines ago, but the story between them hadn't. So they stood there, two people pretending to be other people, slowly realizing that pretending had turned into feeling. When the doors finally opened, the director's voice filled the air. "Beautiful take. That's the one," he said, completely unaware of what he'd just captured. But Junho didn't move right away. His hand was still near hers, his breath still brushing her cheek, his pulse still louder than the applause that followed. Yoon-ae turned away first, her composure perfect as always, but something about the way she blinked felt fragile, like she was trying to hide the part of her heart that had slipped out between takes. That night, after wrap, the set emptied slowly. Crew members packed up lights, laughter echoed faintly down the hallway, and somewhere in the distance, a playlist of soft jazz played from someone's phone. Yoon-ae sat in her dressing room, staring at her reflection. She'd played so many versions of love in her career, innocent, painful, happy, tragic, but this one felt different. This one didn't stop when the director said cut. Her phone buzzed. A message from Junho: "You left your scarf in the elevator." She typed back quickly, "I didn't. I left it with you." There was a pause, one of those pauses that say everything words can't. Then his reply came, "Then I'll keep it." She smiled, quietly. It wasn't flirting. It wasn't confession. It was something quieter, like two people standing at the edge of something they both recognized but couldn't name. The next morning, they shot the final scene, the happy ending, the smiles, the confetti of love. Cameras rolled, lights shimmered, and the director cheered as Ji-won kissed Sarang under the studio's manufactured sunrise. But even as she leaned into the scene, Yoon-ae felt the ghost of that elevator moment press against her chest. The kiss was scripted, perfect, romantic, but it didn't feel half as real as the silence they'd shared the night before. When the drama finally ended, the world erupted in love for their chemistry. Social media lit up with clips, edits, whispers. "They're too natural." That look wasn't acting. Something happened there. Fans saw what the camera wasn't supposed to show: two souls who, for a few months, forgot how to separate work from heartbeat. At the wrap party, under the soft hum of music and champagne laughter, Junho found her again. He looked the same, calm, kind, effortlessly charming, but his eyes carried that same flicker from the elevator. "You disappeared after the shoot," he said. "I needed quiet," she replied. He nodded, understanding instantly. "Yeah," he said, after a pause. "That scene messed with my head." Yoon-ae laughed softly. "Mine too." He looked at her for a long second, eyes tracing the familiar contours of her face like he was memorizing them all over again. "I still don't know why it felt that real," he admitted. She didn't answer. Because the truth was simple, terrifying, and unfixable. It was real. Outside, someone called for a group photo. They posed side by side, smiles perfect, eyes bright, hearts pretending to be steady. But the distance between them felt alive, humming with all the things they couldn't say. Later that night, when everyone else had gone home, Junho found himself walking toward the same elevator, the one where everything had shifted. The building was empty now, lights dimmed, silence thick. He stepped inside, pressed the button, and as the doors closed again, he felt it, that same ache, that same suspended stillness. He could almost hear her voice echoing faintly, that soft different that had changed everything. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the scarf she'd left behind. It still smelled faintly like her perfume, that subtle, unforgettable trace of warmth that had followed him since that day. He smiled quietly to himself, the kind of smile that belonged to a secret too fragile for the world to touch. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Interviews, fan meetings, award shows. Every time someone asked about King the Land, his expression softened. It was special, he'd say. And every time her name came up, his smile lingered a little too long. When they met again, months later, under brighter lights and louder applause, nothing had changed, and yet everything had. He greeted her with the same gentle teasing tone, and she laughed like she always did. But when their eyes met, there was that flicker again, the silent replay of the elevator doors closing. The audience saw actors reunited. But for them, it was something quieter, a heartbeat remembered. After the event, he found her near the exit, standing by the staircase. The noise of the crowd faded behind them. "Do you ever think about that day?" he asked, voice low. "All the time," she said. He smiled. So it wasn't just me. She looked up at him, the same steady gaze she'd given him when everything had started. "Some scenes never really end," she whispered. He didn't know what to say to that. Maybe there was nothing left to say. So instead, he reached out, gently fixing the strand of hair that had fallen across her face. For a second, the world slowed again, the same way it had that day in the elevator, when silence said everything. "Maybe," he murmured, "some weren't supposed to." They parted that night like they always did, politely, professionally, perfectly. But somewhere, in a part of their hearts the world would never see, that scene kept replaying itself. Not on a screen, not in a memory, but in that hidden space where real and make-believe had merged into one quiet truth. Years later, during a magazine interview, Yoon was asked which scene from King the Land she remembered most. She laughed lightly, eyes flickering. "The elevator scene," she said. "Why that one?" the interviewer asked. She paused. "Because it wasn't in the script." When the article was published, fans went wild again. Theories, edits, endless discussions. But behind all the noise, only two people really knew what that sentence meant. Junho read it quietly, smiling. Somewhere in him, that elevator still existed, its quiet hum, its metallic glow, its hidden heartbeat. Because sometimes, love doesn't need a grand confession. Sometimes, it's just the way someone looks at you when they think no one's watching. Sometimes, it's a moment too small for the world to notice, but too real for you to ever forget. And maybe that's what King the Land truly was for them, a love story written for characters but lived by souls who accidentally fell into something that outlasted every script. The world may remember the hotel smiles, the confetti endings, the fairy tale scenes. But the real story, the one that no one saw, was written in silence, in the space between breaths, in the flicker of a glance, in the closing of two elevator doors that refused to open again. So when people ask what really happened after the elevator doors closed, the truth is simple. The cameras stopped rolling. The lights went out. But somewhere in that darkness, two hearts kept beating in rhythm with a moment they couldn't unlive. And that's how the best scenes are made, not by lines, not by scripts, not by directions, but by something wild and real slipping quietly through the cracks of fiction. Because that's where love hides, not in the story we see, but in the one that continues long after the credits fade.